Hey everyone, we are back at it again, and today we're going to learn about sitemaps. So, before we even get into creating them, we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy and why they're so useful. And yes, they are still useful. So, the big question is, people still use sitemaps? Of course they do. It's not just limited to information architecture. Everyone should use sitemaps, especially designers. They help provide structure for your product. Like, look at this. We have the primary navigation, our secondary navigation. We can really plan out all the different navigation schemes within our product. Sitemaps help a lot. So what are they? Sitemaps are hierarchical diagrams of a website or an application that shows how pages are prioritized. I want you to think about the last lesson that we went through. User flows that we did prior are kind of like a street view of what we were discovering in terms of like how the user should achieve goals and where we discovered different types of content we needed. You remember this user flow over here. This is making a purchase. And we discovered a lot of different things. We discovered like the different steps that it took to actually complete a purchase. We discovered different types of micro interactions, all the different close-up details that we didn't necessarily know before. Now, a sitemap is essentially a bird's eye view. This way we can take an early glance of what our product looks like from the treetops. So when do we use sitemaps? Well, sitemaps are generally used in the beginning or really early on in the design process, like right after discovery or kickoffs, right after you get all that information from your clients or from your product team, kind of like what we're doing right now with the application that we're trying to build. They'll really help us when we need to start working on our wireframes. Welcome back. So you may be asking yourself, well, how do I create a sitemap? Well, let's jump in. The first step is anatomy. Let's learn about the anatomy of a sitemap. So essentially, a sitemap will consist of all these linked pages. So we have this as our page. I mean, they don't need to necessarily look like this. Like I said before, with other things, it's all about what works for you, what best represents what you're trying to get across. So right now, I'm just kind of using a little card. I don't necessarily use this when I'm creating a sitemap. So this is the main card. And within the anatomy, you have a reference number. Some people like to use reference numbers. They really kind of help when you're like creating actual wireframes afterwards. You can use that same reference number. You don't necessarily need to. I know a lot of people that like to, but it's a preference. But one thing that is definitely needed is a label. So this label over here is definitely going to be needed because it'll let us understand what the page name is. That is what we really want to know. So what you want to do is you want to start with your home page always. The rows that follow afterwards are by the highest priority. So I say rows because typically people, when they build a sitemap, they're building it from the top to the bottom. You can build it from left to right. Like I said before, it's all preference. So I'm going left to right now. So the next step of the sitemap would be like your primary, secondary, and tertiary pages and so on. So right now we have a primary page. So if we were to think about our current client, we have our home page and you could access a category on that page and that would be our primary level. And then afterwards, you may be able to select a subcategory, and that would be our secondary level. And it could go on and on. I wouldn't advise doing that, but you get the gist. So this is our primary and our secondary, and this is ground zero. Now, you could use a legend if you'd like. It's totally up to you. That's another preference. If you're sharing it with a lot of people, it may help if you have a lot of symbols in there. If you have colors, I like to use colors because it helps to signify whether like a page is public or a member only. So totally up to you. If it really helps to get through what you're trying to say with your product and your sitemap, use a legend. So there are two types of sitemaps. This is a flat sitemap. And this is better suited for smaller to medium-sized products. I'm thinking maybe like 10 to 100 pages, maybe even less, to be honest. There are 4 or less vertical levels. You'll notice that there's only 2 vertical levels here, and that's probably what we'll be using when we create our sitemap. But there are 4 less vertical levels, and they all help enhance the discoverability of content because there are fewer levels to click through. So you want to use this for smaller products. You don't want people to be going too deep unless it's absolutely necessary. The next type of sitemap is a deep sitemap. So these are better suited for larger size sites, and they help house a lot of information. So we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of pages. We're talking maybe pages for like a government website, maybe like a huge e-commerce website. They can get around to 5 vertical levels, which is huge. I mean, we're at 4 here, and you can imagine the amount of pages that you can get into. This ultimately makes it harder to discover content, so you'll need to think about the different ways for users to get to places like menu shortcuts. But yeah, so deep sitemaps, use them for larger products. Don't use them for a product like we're building. So why are they so valuable? Well, they help you plan for usability, and it provides a full overview, which can really help teams simplify and trim unnecessary pages. But really, when you build a sitemap, you can also strategically place content where users can find it. It results in the creation of navigation, hierarchies, and categorizations of your product. You get a good understanding of your navigation, you can calculate the amount of content you need, and it gives you a good understanding of your scope. So sitemaps are incredibly useful. You may not create like a final sitemap, and that shouldn't bottleneck you in terms of starting wireframes or even like sketching and user flows, but you should really start one to get a sense of what your entire navigation scheme is going to look like. Let's jump right into Figma and let's start building our own.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be talking about sitemaps today. Before we begin this tutorial though, I want to show you what exactly we are going to learn within Figma and what we're going to build. So we're going to learn a bunch of different things. We're going to learn how to build these types of assets for our sitemap that are going to be reusable for you in the future and today. And we're going to make non-component versions, and we're going to learn how to use components. And that's going to be super fun. Trust me, it's going to make your workflow and your life just so much more easier. Then we're actually going to build our own sitemap as well. So you're going to need a couple of things before we can actually start building. You're going to need, obviously, you're going to need Figma, but you're going to need the Autoflow plugin. So if I go into my plugins just by right-clicking, this is what Autoflow looks like. And if I were to make a rectangle, it basically allows you to connect one layer to the next, kind of like how we're seeing here. We're going to be using that a lot. So if you haven't used this plugin yet, definitely get it before we start. Okay, let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am going to teach you how to create these assets that I've used for our sitemap. Now, these are some great assets. I'm just going to run through them really quickly to explain why we have a bunch of different colors and what they mean and what this container is over here. So these aren't actually going to be components. We are just making some reusable pieces here. If you're not comfortable with components yet, that's totally fine. We don't have to jump into that just yet, but I will teach that. Now, I have decided to show the sitemap in a couple of different ways. Now, we have a page, and I'm going to break it into pages and the links that are available within that page. We have public links, and that means links that anyone can see, even if you are not signed in or registered. We also have member-only links. Those are links for people who are specifically registered with our product. We have more specific links for logging in, signing up, logging out, that kind of stuff. And we have yellow to indicate the outside links, links that are going to push you outside of the app or product. Ultimately, you may not use all of these. You may use this for future projects. I think it's just great to have them like just ready, but I'm going to get into how to build these. And this is the container over here on the right side that is going to house all of these items. So let's jump right in. So actually, I'm going to just take one of these just to show you what it looks like. So this is essentially just a frame if we break it down. So we can build it together. So what I'm going to do is just use a text layer like I've just done. I press T, and the easiest way to do that is just press T, click, and you have your text layer ready. So if I write, say something like link, and then after I wrap this within a auto layout frame, so I'm going to right click on it, add auto layout. So now I have my link frame. There we go. You can't actually see anything right now because there's no fill. But if we were to say press I to get the color picker and use the color picker on this little link over here, we can easily just copy that. So that's all I basically did. You can choose whatever style you like. I'm going to actually stretch this out a bit, and I am going to add a border radius to this. So I have a 4 pixel border radius. I'm also going to make this a tad taller. So I like using fixed heights on things like this. It really depends on if it's going to run to 2 lines. It may be wise not to for something like this, though. Like a button makes sense to use like a fixed height, but something that may run onto 2 lines, I don't really like to take the chance because then it'll look kind of awkward. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So I'm actually going to keep this pretty simple. We'll make a copy. I'm going to just, duplicate that to the side, and we'll show you what that looks like when you have a fixed height and 2 lines. But so let's jump right in here. So we have the link, we have the auto layout frame. We don't need spacing between items. We can just keep it pretty simple, 16 pixel spacing there and maybe 16 up top. And we will add a stroke. So I'm just going to press the little plus icon here, and there we go. We got our stroke. Now for the stroke, what I did was I just grabbed the color and I basically went down. Don't make it too dark, don't make it too light. It just looks like it's kind of like, just a little bit darker version there. And you can adjust the width, and basically there you go. You could also adjust like opacity if you want of like the link. So the text here, I'm just going to adjust the opacity as 75%, and that is essentially the link. Now let's actually remove this one and make a copy from this since we have it already ready. So if we had 2 sentences that are on 2 different lines, this is a very long link. So if we have a very long link and we set that to fill the container and we shrink it, the actual auto layout container grows. But if we were to set, say, a fixed height and then copied that text over here, make sure it's set to fill container, then we have this issue where this is a fixed height and it's not going to grow with this anymore. So definitely make sure that if things are going to go to a second line, you don't have it set to a fixed height. So that's essentially how you create these individual links. So you can just give them different colors. I like to do that personally. When it comes to the actual page container though, this one's a little bit more trickier. Let's take a look at how it's built. So first off, I'm going to take that right out. So you can basically Command C or Control C, and you could just drag it out of there. Command V, it's going to paste it underneath there, but you can take it out. So I have my links actually set up in a auto layout container. So, and they only have a spacing of 8 pixels. And within that container are my links. Then I have another layer that's right here. So that is just like my page title. Really simple stuff. Now this is the part that is a bit difficult. All I've done here, if we take a look at it, is create another auto layout container with these traffic lights. So these are just circles in a group. We have green, yellow, and red. Basically, it is literally just grabbing the ellipse tool, which is O, making a copy. Oops. And just to mimic like a top of a browser. So really simple stuff. Then you can group it. And then we would frame it again into like an auto layout frame and call it our header. I know I am moving a little quickly here, but I do just want to give you a good understanding. I'm going to grab the color picker with I and click on this just to get the color. And that's basically it. I mean, that's all there really is to mimicking this header. Once we have that header, we can take the rest of our content. We're going to take everything, and you guessed it, if I press Shift A, it's going to throw it in the auto layout frame, and now we have our frame here. And now we can do a bunch of different things. First of all, I'm actually going to set the fill to white. I am going to also add a stroke like I have here. That stroke will be, say, 2 pixels, and I want it to match the color that I have for the header. Another thing I want to do is I want to ensure that this has a nice border radius. So I'm just going to slap something quick on there, and then it's going to clip the content, because you notice I put the border radius, but it didn't really apply to the header. That's because the header background is bleeding off of the frame and we haven't clipped it. So now that we clip it, it's hidden. Now we have the issue of these things. Now you can't just set the padding within, because if I were to do that, it would also create padding for here. So the best way to handle something like this is to actually wrap these two into their own container. So I'm going to use Shift A and set this new container within here to fill. And then I'm going to select all the contents within. You can see my layer is opening up here. I'm going to select them all. You can use Control A or Command A and set them all to fill the container. So now that we have everything fill in the container, we can actually set the different padding and spacing between things. So 16 pixels, I'm going to just have like that as the padding here. And I'm going to set 16 pixels here and 16 pixels at the bottom and the top. And then you can go into your frame, finally, your top level page container. Mine has the name of frame 1, I think it is. And you can remove the padding if you need to. And that's basically all there really is to creating this new page container. Now, the only thing here I have to fix is the header and set that to fill container. And there you have it. You can create your very own version of this pretty quickly. And I would say, if you have some time, you can put your own personal spin on it. But that's how you create your own like reusable little asset for sitemaps. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to talk about components, basic components. We're not getting into really deep details on how to use like components super properly. I just want you to increase your efficiency, make you also feel like you can build better components in the future. But let's start here. So we have these reusable assets. The only problem is that you're just going to need to copy and paste them over and over again, and maybe it's not super efficient. It's still efficient. It's definitely better than nothing. 100%. Big improvement. But if we turn these into components, they would be so much better. So let's jump right in. Really, the only difference I would say between this and a component is you'll be able to access it in your assets table over here. So let's jump in. So these are our current link components. So I'm going to copy them with a Command C or Control C and paste it. I'm going to drag them right out. So these are our links. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to deselect the group, ungroup them. So for me, it's Shift Command G. You can even go into our right click. It's going to be Shift Control G for Windows users. So now that we have all of our components that we want to build, we can do a couple different things. Now we can either just create a component like this, or using the shortcut, we can create individual components, or we can select all of them. So if I'm going to go back in time and undo that, we can select all of them. So we can create multiple components, and now I can access all those components right here whenever I want. Just drag and drop them into whatever field I need, and so on. So these are components, and they're not really, you can edit them, but they're going to be reusable, and you won't be able to necessarily like do much in terms of like touching this master component. So there's two things here. We have our master component, and then we have what we call an instance, and these are copies of the master. So whatever you do to the instance will not affect the master. Whatever you do to the master, though, will affect the instance, as you can tell. If I select all of these and I say change the border radius to 100, that's going to change everywhere. Now, the great thing about instances is that you can swap them pretty quickly. So if I go into here and I select member only, this is where our instances are, I can go and select outside link. So if I want to switch something really quickly on the fly, I can do that. But I'm going to just go back quickly. and fix that. So now that we have these components, we can do a couple of things. We can either leave them as is, or we can actually go the route of using something that I like to call a variants. And variants are very powerful. So if we select them all, since they're all very similar, the reason why you would do this is because you have a similar component to the other similar master component. So an example is primary and secondary buttons, or different states like hover states versus active states. And when you're thinking about like things like inputs and forms. Now, for our little links here, the only difference really is color. It's the color and the type. The differentiator is essentially the color, but the type is like public, member only, login or sign up, and outside link. So if we select all our components, we can click over here, combine them as variants. That's going to put them in this little box. And inside this box, now we have the link version, we have the member only version, and we have the login or sign up version and the outside link version. If we click this bounding box around our variants, we can go in here and specify a couple of things. So they're called properties, and those are the differences between the components. So we're going to say that our property type here is the type of link, or link type. You can go deeper. You can have so many different types of properties. You can have icons and so on and so forth. Like, it can get really advanced. But for this, we're just going to keep it super simple. So we have 4 variants. Now, if I were to say, take a copy, or I have them here now. So it's in my assets panel over here. Now, if you were to take a copy and now go here, you can select member only. It looks a little different. This is going to be great for more complex components. So that's how you create a component, and that's how you start to use variants. The next step I want to talk about is actually creating a component for this over here. So I'm just going to drag a copy over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this public link, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to select in my layers the links container that is housing all of these versions. And I'm going to paste it. There it is. You can see it's outlined in purple. You can see that layer. I'm going to just shift it right to the top, and I'm going to take the rest of the links, select them all here, so I can select them in my layer panel too, and delete them. Then I'm going to take this link and I'm going to copy it and paste it. I'm just going to make sure that's dragged right back into this layer, because sometimes when you copy and paste and there's only one layer within, it'll paste right outside. So we can copy and paste it again and again and again and again and again and again. I know that's kind of crazy, but just stick with me. I promise it's going to get better. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this set up with a bunch of different links, I'm going to turn it into a component. And that's it. And you may be thinking, what are we doing here now? Like, we have a bunch of links. So the great thing about components is you can't add to an instance. So you can't necessarily say, okay, now I want this another public link in here. It doesn't work that way. Once an instance has been created, you can't add to it. But you can hide what you have added. So if you make a very long list, you can take whatever you don't need and press, like, say, delete, and it's just going to hide them in that panel. Then you can go in here and start specifying what you want. Oh, I want it to be this one an outside link, and this one a member only link, and this one a login or sign up link, and so on and so forth. And you never know how many links you're going to have on one page, so it's great to just prepare for the absolute worst and throw them in there. And now you can just either grab links or just grab this every time you need a new page, and just keep on going, and then link them together. And now you have these components that are reusable. Now you may be thinking, oh my goodness, like, why are we doing all this? Like, it just seems so excessive. Well, maybe for sitemaps, but this is a great way to demonstrate how useful they can be. And if I really wanted to, change things, you can start to tell why they're so powerful for things like user interfaces, because sometimes you make one change on a button because maybe you don't like rounded buttons anymore and you want like, flat buttons with like strong, sharp corners. You're going to have to go through all your designs and find all those buttons. Now, if you were using components, you would switch one and, it will be modified everywhere else. If I wanted to, switch here and say that this no longer has like a rounded corner, like I did over here, and it put the border radius to 0, that's going to reflect everywhere. So that's how you use components to create some pretty awesome reusable assets that you can use within your local file. Remember that if you have a free starter plan, this is the only way to use components. You cannot use components across multiple files. You can only use them within the file that you're working in. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be jumping right into creating our very own sitemap. Now, we're going to start with the home screen and work our way out. We'll do what I call the top layer, or the login and registration stuff, onboarding, some of that kind of stuff, and then we'll get into some of the main pages. Now I'm going to be using my component that I created. You can use it too. The assets are there for you. And if you have any sketches, like when we actually did the sketching section, or if you have any user flows, bring those in here because they're going to really help you understand where you need to go and what you need to do. So let's jump right in. So I have the home screen over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with search. I know this isn't necessarily like a public link or anything, but it's actually a very important part of the flow. And then I'm going to go with a member only link. So I think there's probably going to be some sort of like shopping interests section or something like that. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that for now because I'm not sure what it's going to be called just yet. And then we probably have a way to get to categories and deals. Now, one of the big things that I think you should know is that it's just going to come naturally to you when you are actually building your own sitemap and you're starting to work through the project a bit more, depending on what exactly you're building. It's going to be something that you're going to start getting more and more comfortable with in terms of like the subject matter. So we're going to have a couple more member only links. Okay, so we have a wish list. Maybe we'll have orders as well. And it seems like the other option is something like profile. We'll probably have cart. Now, I'm not sure what exactly is going to be part of the main navigation just yet. And that's something I'm going to figure out more and more with, as we refine sitemaps and as we just move forward into the wireframing stage. So what do we have here? Probably a login or sign up. Oops. Let's install that on next launch. And here we go. Okay, so this looks like the great place to start with home. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to think about registration. I think that's fairly important, and we'll start building out that portion. So I'm going to actually make a couple of copies because I'm going to use a bunch of these. So I'm just making a bunch and I'm leaving them here because I'll grab those in a sec. Okay, let's take a look. So we probably have like an introductory screen that I think makes sense. Something like you come in, there's a tutorial maybe, or there's like, either sign up or log in. That seems like something that's really logical for a mobile app. So let's take all these, and what we're going to do is we're just going to press delete, and you can actually delete them and they'll hide because it is a component. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create two different sections, one for login and one for sign up. So I'll call the sign up just sign up. So delete the rest of the text there. And for login, we'll delete the text there. We'll probably steal this one. That makes sense. Okay, so and then I'm gonna just make another one of these for login as well. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have everything laid out to the best of your abilities. So from the login screen, it makes sense that you'd be able to go to like some sort of registration and onboarding. And then from there, you'll probably be able to go to login and then go to the home, because we're not necessarily going to force people to sign up. And that's the right approach I think we should take. So I'm just going to link these together. Now I'm going to run my plugin. Where are you? Autoflow. So I got my Autoflow plugin going. Definitely download this plugin if you don't have it. So when I think about the introductory screen, I think that, okay, from the home, I'm just gonna, hold down Shift when I clicked that little layer and then connected it to home. I'll show you again in a second. So if I click login, so I'm gonna click this link layer over here, and I'm gonna hold Shift and then click this whole container. And just like that, we've created our connections. And some of them are, I would say, you don't necessarily need to do it, but you can fill that in. I mean, I think it's more so useful when you have like the main navigation going somewhere. And yeah, that's basically the first step. Like, just get these normal screens, I would call them, out of the way. And then we're going to move into some screens outlining just the main architecture of it all. Hey everyone, and welcome back. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to start building out some of these different screens that are going to house like things like shopping interests, categories, deals, etc. So let's jump right in. So I'm just going to close my plugin because I'm not going to need it just yet. And I am going to zoom out. Okay. Now I think what makes sense is to start just maybe, I don't know, we can pick a couple, but I'm going to start with shopping interests. So I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to name it. Now you can just follow along with me, or you can go ahead and, do your own thing. If you feel like you have enough of what you need to actually just get started, I think you should at this point, but this will be just something that you can watch just to see how I'm going through that process. So when it comes to the shopping interests and habits, this is definitely going to be a members only section. So I'm going to just make a big note here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a login and sign up. So like to somehow prompt us that, okay, hey, you need to absolutely sign up to go any further. So kind of like a paywall. Over here, what we're going to do is make all these member only links, and then we can probably hide the rest. I think 4 is going to be enough, because what I have in store for this, I'm thinking that this is where, you can discover new products and maybe a way to see just like your general interests and maybe a way to update them. And then you have categories. So you can have a bunch of different types of, categories for the interests. And then you have maybe some deals, maybe. So, I mean, this definitely can work. So deals may be specific to your shopping interests. So I think that will probably suffice for shopping interests. I'm going to move into over here. I'm going to just do categories. And let's see. Oops. There we go. So we have categories. And I'm just going to keep these very, very open. They're going to be all public links. So we have maybe some like trending items or like trending categories. I'm going to leave that. And then we probably have like categories for specific like events, like whether that's something like, oh, it's Mother's Day or something like that, or it's a holiday. This is what you can get for your partner maybe, or your friend. I think there's definitely a lot of stuff we can do with that. which will be really interesting. And then probably I like to say that maybe every page that's like in relation to products will probably have some sort of like deals section, just because we want to push people to stay within the app. And deals are probably one of the best ways to do it, serving up like really good content like that. So, I mean, I'm on the topic right now, so let's think about deals. So deals, we probably have like trending. Oops. I know Amazon does stuff, and other larger retailers kind of do this stuff where they have like these types of like, lightning deals or like giveaways or something like that. Maybe there is a section for like giveaways. I don't know. I think that's something we should maybe explore. And then we have like maybe deals based off of categories. I mean, that seems like just like a common pattern I've seen on e-commerce sites. And oops, you know what? Maybe we do have a member only type of link here, where it's like the content is more so around deals like just for you. I think that makes sense. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for the first half here. When we get back into our next video, we are going to work on the other half of some of these links over here. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We are going to be jumping into the other half of this sitemap over here. So we are digging deeper into some of the finer details. And one thing I really want to point out right now, just before we jump right in, because we are going to get lost in there and just, go through the weeds of, building out those page containers and whatever content is within them. But I think another thing to really stress here is like a sitemap is so good for developing a content strategy. It is so good. Like you can already see that the types of content links that I'm trying to push through each page can make some like really interesting designs, really interesting experiences for users. So definitely go through this exercise, even if you're going to do it on a very lightweight scale. I mean, this is very lightweight. I don't like to spend too much time here, but this lets me think about everything from like a bird's eye view, and then I can make some of those bigger decisions little by little when it comes to the types of content that's going to be on each page, and maybe some pages that I really do want to prioritize. So let's jump right in. So I still have a bunch of my duplicates over here. I'm just going to drag them over. So, okay. I think maybe like the next thing that makes sense right here is I want to actually talk about the cart. We can work our way up now. So the cart is going to be pretty simple. Let me move these out of the way. They're a bit of a distraction. So with the cart, definitely I think there's going to be a section here where it's like if you're not logged in but you have stuff in your cart, you should probably log in. So I'm going to just put in a login and sign up section there. Here you should be able to go to the items in your cart. So you can probably like go to an item listing or something like that, product page. And then you should probably see maybe some similar items. I'm not sure how wise that is, because at this point we really want people to convert and actually check out. So I'm going to keep this one really simple. Maybe we'll have a big CTA to like place your order. Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's actually do this. We'll have one right here that says place order. Okay, and so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the profile page. So that's next. Now we're going to have a bunch of member only links. So I'm going to just make like maybe 4 or 5, just to cover all my bases, and close those ones off. Okay, so when I think about the profile page, like this doesn't need to be something that's super crazy. I think, there should be some account settings here. Definitely some way to maybe, see your interests and get to that section. maybe this profile is a bit more involved, is what I'm trying to get at. Customer service, maybe like a help center. I think that's a pretty cool option. And then I think maybe your orders, like a way to see what you've done in the past. And I think that's it. So, I mean, this isn't a really big task that I'm working on right now. I think ultimately, we're keeping it really simple. So I have orders here now. For orders, this one's a little bit more, I think we need to think through it a bit. So we have probably like a search and filter. People could have many orders, so we need to account for that, way for people to filter through. Probably the most important thing is like the orders that are in progress. So I'll just throw that in there. Then we have past orders. And then finally, we have a help section. Beautiful. So, I mean, I think that's what comprises of an order screen. Search, definitely in progress. We definitely need to see all our orders and maybe a way to contact somebody if something's gone wrong. Maybe that's something that's like an FAQ section. I'm not entirely sure just yet. And then the final screen that we're going to work on is wish lists. Okay, so with wish lists, this one is pretty simple as well. So you probably have like your saved items, and then you probably have a way to like go to those items. That's why I'm putting saved items. And then we have maybe some sharing options. Maybe you can share a list with somebody. I mean, when I think about like maybe my partner and I are buying gifts for people, or we're trying to buy gifts for our kids and we have lists for each individual kid. I don't know. Maybe there's something like that in terms of like a workflow or a user flow. So maybe sharing options and what that looks like and how you link out and support, internal third-party linking. I don't know. Maybe some social media stuff. And then we have similar items. I think this one's a really interesting one. Just trying to get people back into the funnel of adding stuff. And I think that pretty much details what I think is a pretty good sitemap. I mean, we could go into search and talk about like, what does it look like when you click search? You have like an overlay, but we're getting more into the nitty gritty of, maybe search results, search goes to search results or something. Maybe I can add one like that, but there's not much to really add there. And I think that is pretty much it for our sitemap. Great job, everyone. Let's take a look. So we can go ahead now and actually link them all. So I'm going to delete this. We're not going to need it. And I'm going to select everything, bring them down, and then we can link them. So shopping, let's get our plugin first. I actually really love this part. I know it sounds a bit childish, but it's fun to just like see everything come together. And that's perfect. We have wish lists. Then we're gonna have orders and profile, and then add cart. I don't think it's useful to maybe bring login up here. I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. One thing I do want to note though, I mean, we can even go deeper than this. Like this probably isn't totally complete, and that's fine. But like there are sections in here where like we haven't even mentioned like the product page. We haven't even mentioned certain things like, deeper within like a category page. So there's a lot of different things that we are, not looking into. It's going to take a lot of time, but I very much urge everyone to kind of keep on going deeper until you feel like it's enough. And that is how we create a sitemap in Figma. Hey everyone, and welcome back. I want to give you some very quick tips on how to build great sitemaps and not get stuck in the process. This may seem overwhelming, but it is really easy to pull off. So one of the big tips I always give people is don't think about two things at one time. If you're working on a sitemap, you don't want to start thinking about where to put things while you're also thinking about what things to put. Keep it simple. Focus on one thing at a time and you'll make way more thoughtful decisions. So when we were thinking about some of these types of pages, like, yeah, it's great to start thinking of this content strategy. I love to, but we're not going that deep just yet. We're touching the first layer, and then, we're digging deeper and deeper gradually. The second tip I'd like to give is to bring in your user flows. Now, your user flows should indicate the types of pages you need and where they may fit within the structure of your app. So I mentioned, search not necessarily being an actual link, but this user flow is something that we already had thought of. We know that there's some sort of intermittent overlay where they're searching and then they go to the search results and then they get to the page. So we already had an understanding of that model and that flow. So definitely use your user flows and your sketches. Now, speaking about sketching, tools. Now, you can definitely start with sketching, but once you start to revise, move it over into an online tool like Figma. It's great to see those structure maps that you can build, but ultimately, this is where you're going to refine everything and move forward. I think another thing that people don't think about is colors. I mean, you don't need to go crazy with colors. Just because it's a sitemap, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have colors. I like to use colors to highlight things like screens that are maybe visible to certain users, like we have here with member-only links and public links. It also makes your sitemap much easier to just remember instead of thinking of it as a black and white set of cards. That's super boring. And I think the last thing, and this is it, don't aim for perfection. Things are going to change. You just want to set yourself up for success and give yourself the best chance possible to succeed. You're never going to get it perfect. I've seen things like this thrown out later in the process when there's some sort of large product pivot. I need you to remember that once you have a good idea of what your product structure is going to look like, move on to your wireframes, dig deeper, and test some of those assumptions that you're making here, because these are a lot of assumptions. This is just giving us a nice little bit of a plan to move forward. Your sitemap's not going to answer all the questions, but it will give you that starting point for your wireframes. So remember, be lean,